This is For the Creators.
Welcome back to another episode of For the Creators, where it's our job to demystify creativity. In these long-form conversations, we tease out tips and tricks from all kinds of creatives who are both in front and behind the scenes of the creative industries. In this episode, we sit down with the founders of We Are Stripes, Nene Pasatam, Hayden Karodas, and Nakama Davies. We Are Stripes addresses ethnic diversity imbalance in the creative industries. They create and increase opportunities for individuals from ethnic backgrounds. During our conversation, we touched on the barriers to entry faced by BAME creatives, Black and minority ethnics. We Are Stripes caters to creators from all ethnic backgrounds. Because this episode is being published during UK's Black History Month, we decided to focus on the challenges faced by Black individuals trying to navigate their way throughout the creative landscape. Our conversation with the team was informative and thought-provoking, but we've also tried to provide you a balanced view on the topics. This is because We Are Stripes endeavours not to only highlight the issues faced by BAME creatives, but to provide creatives and organisations with the tools to address the issue. So without further ado, please enjoy our sit down with We Are Stripes.
So a lot of the work that you've done in the past is to raise awareness about the underrepresentation of BAME groups in the workplace. At what point did you decide to focus on taking strategic action rather than just raising awareness?
I think it started, well, for me, the journey started in St Pancras Hotel. I think it was...
Do you remember that?
Yeah. So Etty had read, my brother had read an article about a certain company named Nameless that we would have thought would have had more diverse representation, but it didn't. It was less than 2% in this article. So we had that initial chat, looked around and said, okay, is it reflective of our own experiences? Which largely it was. And then did a bit more research and actually found, okay, this is what is actually manifesting itself. Speaking and looking at some of the other groups and people that had that same experience is seeing who was actually doing things in this space. So I think the landscape 4 years ago was different to how it is now. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of groups starting to say, right, there's benefits to diversity in the workplace. This is panels to better make people more aware, but there was definitely a bit of an action gap between a lot of the things that are being said and the things that are being done. Okay. So I think us collectively then took it upon ourselves to say, okay, well, how can we be more of the solution, as well as feeding into the discussion, create something that's actually actionable and practical and take those steps. So.
No, absolutely, yeah. And even when I came on board, and I remember Cam's brother speaking to me about it, and because we used to work together a long time at quite a large agency, and we were just kind of reflected on how it was for us there, some of the challenges that we had, some of the victories that we had as well, and we were like, okay, we've been in this for over a decade, so how comes we are not seeing more representation? I mean, I was a freelancer at the time, so obviously I was still going into agencies and still seeing that people like myself and my associates were not really visible. They're around as we quickly discovered, but they're not really as visible as they should be. So it was like, okay, and me being like a person of action, I don't just like to talk about things. I like to actually get things done and move things along and everything else. So that's how we started. Yeah.
How did you come up with the name We Are Stripes?
It's an interesting one. It was a decision by consensus, wasn't it? So I think there was about a dozen names shortlisted and everyone chose the name. But actually what I found interesting is people taking their own meaning into it. Yes. So a lot of people interpret it as actually like earning your stripes, or stripes being a sense of achievement, like you have with like disciplined organisations, military, etc. But then when we did some of the branding around it, and if you think of a stripe, so stripe is a line of colour, different from its background. Stripes are usually parallel and equal, so they're equivalent, so that sense of equality, but they all move in the same direction. Wow. The more stripes you have with different colours, variations, the more interesting creative patterns that you can emerge as well.
We've thought about it, didn't we?
Yeah, for real.
Just a little bit. But I like the meaning behind the name. It's really powerful, and it also represents what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
So it leads me to asking, you're all extremely successful at what you do. So, have you...
Sorry.
Well, I think you are.
Sorry.
So you're extremely successful at what you do, but have you experienced discrimination in the workplace yourself? If so, what happened and how did you handle that situation?
I think discrimination is I think for me, it's not really, I don't know if you could say it's discrimination, but there's always a feeling when you go into an office or you go into a new building and you feel like you're the other, or you're the only one person in that situation. So it's, for me, that's what it's always been the case of. I've gone into agencies as the only person, and you sometimes feel you have to act in a certain way or be a certain way or conduct yourself in a certain manner. And I think that's been my form of discrimination, if that makes sense. I know, for example, one agency I worked at, there was one other black person and there was the two Asian people. And the two Asian people used to joke the same way that me and the other black person used to joke, because they were like, oh yeah, we're the only brown people. And it was interesting to see that dynamic, because I often used to think it's only a black thing, if that kind of makes sense.
Yes.
Whereas it was interesting to see that they had the same kind of banter between themselves and the same kind of,
Yeah.
well, you know, there's only two of us. You know what I mean?
And did you find that you automatically mixed with the black person? You gravitated towards that black person?
I think people
or?
always gravitate to what they can identify with, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I think it's good. What's really important about cultures is when agencies actually make an effort to actually integrate people and to start to talk about things they do have in common, things they can relate to. Whereas you'll probably find with a lot of agencies that you'll get a new role, go do your role, and that's kind of it. You're on your own. So I think that's one of the good things about Stripes, that we're here, that we can actually help people ask these questions for your mentor, so they can say, okay, how do I deal with this situation, or how do I maneuver through agency world when I'm the only person there, sort of thing. And that's one of the good things about us, I think.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about your question, because if I'm honest, there's times when I've had certain situations in agencies, like I've gone into an agency and they've assumed that I was something that I was not. For example, I'll go into an agency and they'll be like, okay, you must be the copywriter, you must be the account manager or whatnot. You can't be the art director or the graphic designer, because one, you're black, and two, you're female, and haven't met as many as me. But I had to kind of balance it out and see whether some of it was down to my own way of how I thought of myself, you know, because my mum always told me, you know, if you want to be seen as half as good, you have to work twice as hard. And that's been in my mind for like a long time, you know.
Yes.
So whenever that, I didn't really see it as discrimination, or I didn't identify it as discrimination. It might have been, but I didn't see it as that. I just thought, okay, fine, I'm here, I can just prove myself, which I did, you know, like time and time again. I did have one agency, and they were just like, they called me in and they were like, okay, we took a look at my portfolio, and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, fine, you know, thank you for your time. And then I went and they sent me an email. They were like, we really don't think you're actually very good enough, so it's sorry, we won't be calling you back in. 2 days later they called me, because they said that the freelancer that they got in beforehand, they didn't like his work, so they got me in to do it, and they said, okay, we're going to give you a trial, and see how you get on. I worked for that agency for 3 years.
Okay.
yeah So I don't know whether it's discrimination per se, but it's an underestimation. That's the better way to put it.
That's a good word.
Yeah, it's an underestimation. And where that came from, I don't quite
And
know.
also an element of maybe stereotyping.
Possibly, yeah.
I'd
possibly.
say definitely stereotyping.
Yeah.
I don't know if discrimination in its truest sense.
Form, exactly.
Yeah, kind of to Nene's point, is a bit of a challenging one. I've definitely experienced stereotyping, kind of racist, borderline comments have kind of reared their head as well, or things that even in the context of it, someone might assume to be a joke or something that's appropriate behaviour, which is just wildly isn't. That's had to been dealt with by my colleagues or directly. I know personally for me, when my first job coming out of university, it was me and another black candidate were on it. So he was the other black graduate that was on this programme. But the programme itself was generally quite culturally diverse. And then one of the other grads came up to me and was like, oh, you guys have done really well to be here, because like black people don't usually thrive in this environment.
Yikes.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And reacted quite badly at the time, as you would. And then got called out for being the aggressor in that scenario.
Yeah,
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
So it does kind of manifest itself in all forms. Discrimination, if it is ignorance, yeah. And it might even be the fact that discrimination is so subverted that you're not even aware of it.
And I think that was my experience as well. Yeah, you know, I mean, there's sometimes when I had to, for want of a better word, kind of educate people, because I remember one guy talking to me and he kept lapsing into a Jamaican accent, you know. So kept saying things in a Jamaican accent.
Is he a white guy?
Yeah, it
Oh.
was. Yeah, and I had to. After a while, I was like, you do realize I'm not actually Jamaican, And he's like, oh, so where are you from? Then I had to explain, okay, I'm Nigerian, etc., etc. There's a difference. One's here and one's here. So it's just things like that, and that. And I actually made fun of him. I actually said to him, so do you get all of your knowledge of black people off TV? And he got really offended by that, as you kind of would. But it was just to say that, look, I understand that I'm the first black person that you've met, but instead of making assumptions, why not
Ask
just talk to
questions.
me? Exactly,
Yeah.
just ask questions and get to know me as a person first. So I've run up against a lot of that, but that is just like, to me, it's just water off a duck's back. It's like, whatever.
What was that like for all of you guys coming together as We Are Stripes and then comparing stories? And
I think you hear a lot of stories.
Yeah.
We work with so many different
Yeah.
initiatives and different agencies or organisations. You hear stories across the creative industry, and I think like you'll find it's the same story over and over again. For me, that's why I think it is mainly about, a lot of it is due to ignorance. We're like 3% of the whole population. So if you then think, okay, I watch TV, you'll see most of the time you'll see a caricature of a black person on TV. You'll see any of the negative tropes that are normally rolled out. So if that is that's all you see, that's going to be your assumption. So it's just about breaking. That's why we were talking about earlier about pushing the talent. We don't really want to focus on the negative side of things.
That's
okay,
right.
look,
Yeah.
That's
look,
right.
let me just keep showing you how good it is, and then
that's
if
right.
it becomes commonplace,
That's right.
you don't
So
even
focus more on the solution.
Exactly,
rather than
yeah.
the problem.
Absolutely.
Because I think
Because
that's
people
what,
do.
as a race, that's what we've been so caught up in, and
Yeah.
not just in recruitment and in the workplace. It's just in general.
Yeah.
We're so caught up on focusing on the issues rather than actually thinking, okay, this is where we are. How do we solve this problem
That's
and
right.
move on?
That's right. Yeah, that's
So
right.
we've just been stuck in a rut for decades.
Yeah.
So it's time to move it forward.
uplift.
Yeah.
Which takes me on to the latest McKinsey report that found that companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians. So although diversity gives a company a competitive advantage, companies are still not hiring from the BAME groups. What do you think is the reason for that?
A big problem is informal networks. So a stat read recently that about 40% of jobs in the creative industry are actually advertised. So the ones that aren't are due to informal networks. If people that are already incumbent in the organisations only know a certain type of person, that exacerbates that
There you go. Yeah.
in and of itself. So
Yeah.
there's one, I think you've got the recognition of it. So that's where the stage of maturity where a few organisations are. And then there's actually the tools and mechanisms to do
That's
something
right.
about
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
And I think you have to take those companies on those two journeys, basically, particularly in the recruitment side of things. And then obviously if there is a method of which they can source the talent that they want, or talent that is different from what they already have in an organisation, then you have to look at, are there any biases through the recruitment process?
That's right.
Whether they're conscious or unconscious, but then even not just the actual organisation, but the recruiters that are being sourced as well.
That's right.
So those suppliers, do they have their own biases? So I think those are still some of the blockers.
Yeah, that's right. Because everyone would agree that obviously if your team is a reflective of the society you're trying to reach, then obviously it's going to perform better if it is. But yeah, just like Cam's saying, I think it's difficult to change a system when it's so set. It's so set. It's like,
ingrained in them, yeah.
this is how we've been doing it for how many decades, Yeah, we see the need to change it, but this is how we've been doing it, So yeah, it is kind of like a two-pronged approach, as Cam was saying. You have to look at the people and their own biases, and then obviously the structures and how they recruit and whatnot. And to be fair, because we can't always just blame the institution, as it were, we have to kind of look back at the black community and how creative industries and creative careers are not always seen as credible, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not seen as credible. They're just seen as like something you can do as a hobby and whatnot. Everyone must go into law or accounting or whatnot. So that's another part of the problem, which we kind of try and solve, because it is a credible career. Yeah, we've all three of us have had ones. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Currently, only 13% of the creative industry is made up of black and minority ethnics, and 8% of those are in senior positions. how important is it for companies to champion diversity and inclusivity? So we shouldn't even have to say that word.
Yeah,
That's why I couldn't say it.
Exactly.
But yeah, how important is that?
Can't stress
At
it enough,
every
really.
level.
Can't stress it enough, really. We just can't. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it's again. So I go back to my story about Ete. When I saw that he was the MD, that blew my mind. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, there's an MD at a big agency, and that's why I got in contact. If he was on the same level as me, I might not have, because I would expect it. So to see an MD, that was something that was quite refreshing for me. And we've got a saying called "see it, be it." That is very true. When you see something, you do that is you believe you can become it. You believe you can be it, and so.
See it,
For that reason alone, it should be. It's important.
Yeah.
love that.
And when we've spoken to emerging talent or people just coming into the industry, when we go to our career fairs and speak to people at universities, their biggest complaint by far is that there's no visible role models. It's like, well, where are they? I've had even my mentees go to me, it's like, wow, where have you been? Where have you been? How comes you've been doing it for X amount of time and I've never heard of you. Never heard of you, And just to have someone like me they can see, or someone like Hayden or Cam they can see who's doing bits.
It's attainable.
It means that if they can do it, that I can do it as well. As I was telling you earlier, I had a talk at an organisation called You Make It, and as soon as I told the founders I was from Hackney, they were like, "You need to come and talk to me. You need to come and talk to the girls. You need to come and talk," because even in location, some people can feel, okay, I'm from this certain place, I can't really achieve anything, but that's not true. That's not true. But again, just like Hayden's saying, it goes down to being able to see someone who's actually done it, who's come before you, and has the kind of like the presence of mind to come back and say, look, I've done it, this is what you can do as well. It's so powerful, you have no idea. So powerful. And
I would say from the brand side of things, they're a commercial enterprise. The thing about most of creative industries is that there's always an audience. It's an industry that always has an audience, so you need to have that audience represented to make sure you're being authentic. Right. In terms of how you're delivering your message, to make sure that in terms of how you're designing your products and solutions, it fits best that group that you're trying to represent or that you're trying to communicate with to get that advocacy or loyalty or revenue from. I think the other part of it, particularly looking at senior levels, is certain roles, particularly in the creative industries, there's a talent shortage as well, and ensuring that you're getting the best person means opening that to a wider range of candidates naturally, because it helps the competition, it helps the productivity of that organisation as well. And I don't think enough of that has necessarily happened, particularly at the kind of senior levels as well.
That makes sense.
So you touched on the fact that for the most part in the creative industries, it's more about who you know and not necessarily what you know. Do you think that is one of the main barriers to entry for BAME creatives as well?
Yeah, I think again it comes down to it comes down to whoever that person's network is. So if you're a senior person who might be Caucasian, who's brought up in Oxford or Cambridge or brought up in whatever area, that your community might not know anybody within a Black, Asian or another. So therefore you don't have any friends in that. Or you might have friends but not enough who will say, okay, can I get your son in, or let me get your daughter in, or let me. So if you don't have that network, you can't reach out to anybody because you literally don't know
anyone.
Exactly.
It's not your world. So it's just about creating those diverse networks for everybody, so that they can have that community. They can reach out and say, okay, Nene, you know this person. Okay, I might not know them, but I know you know this person.
Exactly.
That's another good thing that we try and do, where we go in and show agencies, okay, you don't have to networks, but we can at least give you networks of quality people.
Because that was going to be my next question, because there could also be a positive side to that. So the more BAME creatives that do that, the wider the network will become.
Exactly. And it goes back to Cam's point earlier about how roles and how they're advertised. It's only a certain number that on job boards and whatnot. The rest come from your relationships and they come from your network as well. So if you're not part of the network, then by association you've kind of like no longer in that left out, exactly, not in that conversation. So it's Yeah, we know it's not ideal, but that is how it works. And I think it's a case of showing people how it works, telling them how it works, and equipping them so they can use that. They can use it to their advantage,
Yeah.
and not turn into nepotism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you think the onus then goes on to the people in those positions to kind of shout about themselves some more, so they're more visible to people, so those networks become more visible, so it's not just on the candidates to look for them?
I would say visible and accessible.
Yeah.
There's kind of
Yeah.
two parts to it. So you could have someone who's extremely visible, but actually, how can you draw down from that
Sure.
knowledge?
Absolutely, yeah, that's
I
true.
think what happens, not just at BME senior level, but at most senior level, particularly when people are trying to move up or laterally, is that sometimes there's like not enough room in the lifeboat scenario. So once they get there, they're like, okay, I'm happy to show you who I am, but I'm not necessarily going to share how you got here. So I think once you have that two together, it will definitely help things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Gosh, sorry, no, you're right. Sorry, someone told me about that. They were like, okay, I've got to this position, but I got here. I did it myself. Why can't you do it yourself? And it's like, yeah, but that's not. Then you can't then complain that the problem keeps kind of like going around in circles because you're not willing to be part of that solution, aren't you? And I often tell, especially the senior management and senior level talent that I kind of speak to, that it is not about them per se. It's like, yes, we can raise your profile, yes, we can show that you're visible, but it is for the people who need to see you. It's not just for you to be. This is not a PR exercise. This is so that people can see people like you and know that your station is obtainable for them.
Be it.
See it, be it. That's right. Yeah, see it, be it. That's right. Yeah.
And I think the kind of the who you know is what you know as well, because I think by having that network, you actually discover how to get that knowledge base to move you on to the next step.
That's true.
So it is. I think the two are kind of in twinned.
Yeah.
As
Who
well.
you know is what you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can draw down from that as a source of learning or
Absolutely.
development as well. So
This is essentially what mentoring is, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
So how much do you think culture itself has an impact on the number of BAME individuals who pursue creative roles? Saying that, it's going back to the whole issue around parents not thinking that it's a role that's going to provide stability.
Well, again, I suppose it comes down to it's generational. So let's say cliche, but say you go Windrush, for example. When they came over, they wouldn't. All you're coming over here to do is work and provide an income so you can get money for other people at home or etc.
Yeah.
You're not coming here to think, I'm coming here to build a style of career for myself just so I can build a career. You're coming here to support people.
Yes.
So it's a totally different mindset when you're thinking as a young person who's thinking, I want to build a career. You're not thinking, I want to support my mum, I want to support my siblings, or I've got a son. You're just thinking, I want to build a career.
that's true.
So therefore, they see it as a different. They see it differently. They see it as you need to make as much money as possible. Whereas a young person would be like, no, I want to have a career where I love and enjoy. So it's about getting that balance.
That's right. Yeah,
And
that's
not
true.
to go
So
back
it's
to the
more
last
about
question.
self-actualization rather than just working to provide for the family, because most probably had to send the money back home. So it's about accumulating as much money as possible and not about you actually feeling good about what you do.
Yeah, being completely selfless in a sense and supporting.
That's a good point, you know. Yeah.
and I think from parents' perspective, is even seeing that that kind of the point was raised earlier in terms of the creative industries can be a method of providing. In the sense that it's not a project, or you're not going to be like a cliche like starving artist. Essentially, basically. So I think
that's the perception, isn't it?
completely.
Could it also
Completely.
be what they consider to be a creative role? Because I think that most of them would think that a creative role would be painter, photographer, or a musician. But then they'll see an advert on television, they'll never think about where that advert came from and things like that. So maybe it's just lack of knowledge and ignorance about what the creative industry actually involves, and that's part of the reason why we chose to focus on identifying as many roles within the creative industry as possible through our podcast, because some of the roles we weren't even aware of ourselves. And there's such a variety of roles that pay well.
Exactly.
I think there needs to be some effort placed into actually educating people about the industry and not just expecting to hire.
And there is it's your understanding of the word creative as well. Like you said, you can be creative in so many different ways.
That's right.
Let's not be trying
Such
to
a
spread it
broad
thin.
term,
yeah.
You can be, like we were talking about finances, then you can be creative with numbers, and it sounds cliche like you're trying to spin something, but you generally can.
Yeah.
You can do some amazing things in
Yeah.
So it's just about really understanding what we mean when you working at a creative agency or working at an advertising agency. And so, okay, you work in finance, but you need to make these numbers work here because you need to do this.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's problem solving.
Yeah.
It's problem
Problem solving,
creativity.
yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And also, if I'm honest, I mean, my as I've mentioned, my background is Nigerian, so it's my parents were very much about being able to say to their peers, "Oh, my daughter is a lawyer or is an accountant," because that's what their peers understood. So, you know, for the longest time, my dad was like, "Oh, I'm in IT, I'm an IT consultant." I was like, "No, Dad, that's not what I do." That's what he understood.
Yeah.
That's what
resonates.
Yeah.
That's what resonates, and that's what he could wrap his mind around. Just not no slur on him. It's just that because of the generation that he's come from, that was considered a stable career.
Yes.
You know, so yeah.
Do you think it will be a generational thing in terms of obviously like our generation then becoming parents and then changing that rhetoric because it is what like the what you know changes?
Yeah, sorry, Cam. Sorry,
Yeah.
I think so. It's because I've had a conversation with people where their kids have said to their parents they want to be YouTubers, and then their parents freaked out. The parents just freaked out.
Younger generation.
Yeah, younger. And I was like, wait. This is the problem we have. Why are you now perpetuating the same problem but just in a different way? And it just comes down to the lack of understanding and whatnot. Because if you do a YouTube channel right, you can make a lot of money.
It's also about being able to embrace change.
That's right. Yeah.
And also having the ability to do a bit of horizon scanning where you're looking ahead. Like
That's
most
right.
people just think about the roles that are available now. But if you start thinking ahead, roles like, you know, being a lawyer, being a doctor and all of those will be, and even being an accountant, they're being replaced by technology.
Yeah, exactly.
And the roles themselves are actually changing. So the roles of the past are no longer as essential as they were back then.
That's right.
And people
So-
create their own jobs these days. I mean, one of the clients I work with is Unilever, and they were talking about. We had a meeting with them the other day, and they were saying we need someone who's an Amazon specialist. We need a digital Amazon specialist. We need a like what is that?
That's
Digital Amazon specialist who specializes on Amazon and how it works and how they're
Wow.
like, and these are high paying roles. But it's like you said, that role didn't exist 2 years ago, let alone 10. So I mean, so it's
Exactly.
I think it's coupled as well with the fact that university means something different today.
Yeah.
The value of a degree is something entirely different today than what it was. So a lot of people are seeking alternative routes through education, and naturally that is going to manifest itself in terms of alternative routes for careers. I think hopefully that link between industry and education will come closer. As people kind of look and see some certain examples of how people can do it. And I think the generation prior to us, the older generation, maybe looked at vocational careers in a different light because it's harder to be denied opportunity if you have a vocation. So if you have a professional qualification, if you are a qualified doctor, accountant, engineer, no one can take that from you.
That's right.
That makes a lot of
It's
sense.
also
Yeah.
easier
sense,
to place you in terms of recruitment. Because if you're an accountant, you go to an accountancy firm. And so the role's not vague. So, for example, you heard Amazon specialist. So what which company do you even work for? What are you going to do? If you say lawyer, you go and work for a law firm.
That makes sense, actually.
So straightforward.
And you've got like creative industries, a lot of the output is subjective by virtue anyway. So even if you've got someone who you might have like biases or they're working with certain people because that's in their own network, it's harder to overcome that, or the perception is at least it's harder to overcome that versus a vocation where you could say, I am a qualified X.
Yeah,
Look
that's
at the
right.
results that I've delivered. That it's empirical versus that
That's a
kind of
fair point,
subjectivity.
actually.
What
That's a
impact
fair
do you
point.
think globalization's had on the conversation as well? Because obviously now there's more opportunities. The world's a lot smaller. So as a creative, you have the opportunity to sometimes maybe work for an organization in another part of the world and not necessarily just here. So
It's been a good thing. I think if you're somebody who's genuinely focused and understands the world is a big place, you can make money anywhere. So I mean that's the sense of there's an audience for everything. So if you want to be someone who loves tissue paper, I guarantee you could probably find 1,000, 100,000 people who just love tissue paper and who will talk about tissue paper with you all day long. So it's just about understanding that if you are someone who's focused and you really want to work. You can do that now because of the internet, because of the world.
Yes.
And it's just getting that understanding of things, I think.
And understanding a particular niche as well, isn't it? Yeah, just like you said, there seems to be a niche for everything.
There is,
I was complaining the other day on social media about this lady who my kids discovered who cooks cakes, just bakes. All she does is bake. But what she does is that she bakes items from computer games. So she'll play a computer game, she'll see like a cake, like in say Breath of the Wild or Mario Run, and then she'll bake it physically. She'll just bake it physically, yeah. She has 10 million subscribers. So she's making more money than anyone in this room, you know? So, and all she does is bake, but she just bakes for a specific niche.
Audience,
Yeah.
Finding your tribe. Finding your niche.
Yeah, that's a big tribe though.
It's
like the more-
worlds,
Yeah.
cookery and video games.
And video games. It was
Exactly.
nuts.
It's what it goes back to what you said about creating your own job,
Yeah.
creating your own roles. Yeah.
Couldn't believe it, actually, to be fair.
How do you feel about companies that allow creatives to volunteer for more than 6 months without pay, particularly BAME creatives?
For 6 weeks.
Yeah, that was cool in the 90s. No, it's not. Personally, because I value time quite a bit, I think 6 months. Did you say 6 months? That's taking
6
a bit.
weeks, I'll say.
Oh, 6 weeks.
Oh, 6 weeks. Even that is. I don't know. This is the thing I don't know, because you can have an opportunity that you can get in that 6 weeks, even though you're not being paid. So the value of what you get could literally outshine the monetary value you would have got. But at the same time, I do understand this is people's time. People have to live. London's expensive.
Exactly.
You know?
I'm always on the fence and
Yeah.
stuff like that, because I do believe that giving your time to something, although everybody wants to make money, but I think if you're young and you're in the world where you live at home, you don't have any bills to pay per se, do it. I mean, and I don't mean 6 months. 6 months is way too long. But if it's like a short time frame, because you don't know who you meet, you don't know what
Exactly.
connections you're going to
Exactly.
make, you don't know
Exactly.
how much you're going to impress somebody.
Exactly.
I've got a friend who's 31, and no, I'm lying, she's 33, and she's just become an intern again. Simply because, and like, she's been designing bags her whole life, and she's an amazing bag designer, but she's never been able to get into a really big company.
Right.
And this was the only way she could get in. And so she's gone back to be an intern. And they offered her, I think it was 4 months, and she could only do 2 because like, I can't work for free for that long.
Yeah.
But she still went in to do it. And for me, I love her for that. I'm like, find your role and get in how you need to get in. So sometimes you have to be able to balance that. What is the short-term sacrifice for the long-term goal?
That's right.
I also think it may depend on what stage you are in your career. So as a university student or someone who's just left school, or even during your gap years we had with Storm, who appeared on our show, she found it really valuable. So I think it also depends on your responsibilities as well. But if you just, because one of the things I found when I left university is because they build you up to think, oh yeah, as soon as you get your degree, you're going to get a job of paying you this amount, and then you realize you've got
Sold
no
the dream.
experience. So how do you gain experience sometimes without actually working for free?
But that is something we tried to do with our competition now, like when we did the rebrand.
Yes.
That is something we really thought about. We did think about the fact that people always want experience, but there are quality people out there.
Yeah.
So let's try and give career opportunities for younger people or have you that can actually create a solid piece of work and receive some sort of payment for it. And that is something that we're going to try and do more of, where we can try and champion people who maybe don't have the experience, but they can gain the experience doing this, and they'll get paid for it, and then that way they can build their own little portfolio of work.
And we'll guide them through the process as well, and kind of like help them with that, because again, just like you're saying, that's the experience. I don't know, it's give or take for me. Like I always say, it's always about the value exchange. So if you can work for free for say 6 weeks, and the value you get out of it is amazing, you get your contacts, you get your experience, etc., then yeah, but let's be real, companies will take the mick with it. They will. They'll just be opportunist about it, and so that I don't agree with.
From a company perspective, what would be more frustrating if you had someone who's super talented, was going to work for you, but you couldn't allow a small amount of budget to just make sure they got there on time and that they were fed.
Exactly.
So I think it is slightly counterintuitive. Fair enough, you might have intern opportunities, but I firmly believe that there needs to be some sort of subsidy towards them. That's fair and appropriate, right? Or do you have to make it available so that if a candidate or an individual needs to draw on it, then they can do. But if they don't, then fine, if it's unpaid work. But because in that scenario, everyone can benefit from it, and it doesn't have to be a lot. And obviously, if you've got someone in to do the work, you're expecting to make profit or money or some return on it. So it's an investment in your own organisation to think that you'd be like, oh, I only want people that can do it and afford to do it.
That's the
So
thing,
you're not giving
Exactly.
yourself the best shot.
And that's what my
Yeah.
next question was going to be. Do you think that financial barrier actually limits the opportunity for a creative individual or a good candidate, because they might not be in that position where they can even volunteer for 6 weeks?
I think it's two. Again, it's twofold. The people who can't, then yes, I agree. But I think there's also some people who don't invest in themselves, and I believe that people. So I predominantly worked in the music industry before I moved into the scene I am now, and people would say, "Oh, I've got to pay X amount of money for studio," and I don't want to do that, but I'll pay £200 for a pair of trainers. But I won't pay £200 to go into studio to record my so-called career and what I want to do. And it's about people understanding that invest in yourself. So again, I don't mean that for everybody, because everybody won't have that money. But if you do have that money to invest in yourself. For me, I came into the industry quite late, so I had to build my own community. I had to go and say, okay, I'm going to start a little business where I can try and get a job, because I can't intern, because I just felt I was too old to intern, so I can't intern, so let me try and go and connect to people who I know, okay, I can do this, I can do social and digital for you for X amount of money, can we build it like that? And that's how I built my network out in the first place. But I had to invest in myself, so okay, build a little website with functionality and telling you what I can do, build a little bit of social following saying this is what I can do for you. And that's just about me believing in what I could do, because I couldn't be an intern at 30 when I started. You know what I mean? So,
That makes a lot of sense. Some organisations have a quota to employ, let's say, 25% BAME employees. Do you think that's like token employment?
So I've got mixed feelings on quotas. I don't fundamentally disagree with them, but it's their execution and deployment in the recruitment process. So a quota on a slate, great. It means that you get a wide range of candidates, a wide range of talent. A quota on employment that isn't necessarily going to deliver the desired effect for anyone. For that individual, well, rightly or wrongly, they could have the perception of being that quota candidate, which has happened a lot in certain markets as well, where you've had that. But actually, you want to have maybe some of those barriers or guide rails in terms of, all right, we want to have this amount in the shortlist early, higher up the funnel. And that means that everyone still has a meritocracy when they're getting on their own value. But again, you're focusing back on the talent. It's about getting the wider wealth of talent that you can get into an organisation versus having a tick or a checkbox exercise. So,
But how do you strike that balance though? Because that must be really difficult for a recruiter. Because on the one hand, you're getting told don't just employ someone just because of their ethnicity. But on the other hand, you're saying we need to employ people of colour. So how do you strike the right balance?
I think it's going back to it's what are the stage of the recruitment process. I think recruiting someone just on the basis of one of their characteristics isn't again, it's not going to deliver the desired result or effect. I think with diversity recruitment in particular, it's more about removing barriers and shifting where you're sourcing talent from.
That's right, exactly.
Versus kind of parachuting people into positions.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Probably my biggest frustration is because it's that misconception as to this is what the quota actually means, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think you need to have those kind of guide rails, and then you need to have goals. So a goal could be, we want our company to be as reflective as this. Because as soon as you have a quota and it's a target, people will seek to take a shortcut.
That's right.
Anytime you do that,
that's right.
and it just won't get the output that you want it to have.
Yeah.
And that's the problem I have with the quota, because then you dehumanize it and you remove the emphasis on the people and you put it on the number.
Yes.
You know, so it's like, okay,
It becomes a data point.
exactly. And this isn't data points. Diversity isn't data points. It's these are people's lives. These are people's lives. You know, so it's not about that. It's about ensuring that it is the right person for the job, regardless of their ethnicity. The ethnicity shouldn't be something like the deciding factor. It's like, we're not going to line up a whole load of people. They're all basically.
We're only recruiting black people then.
Come
again soon.
Exactly. Like I said before, it's not add black people in the mix. You know, it's fundamentally, just like saying, fundamentally changing the culture of the organisation so it attracts more people from.
And I think the culture is the big part, because if it's not something that is championed from the top, it just doesn't work.
Yes,
It really doesn't work. If it's a mid-level manager or a lower manager who's just saying, yeah, we need to get more people in, it just doesn't work because there's no buy-in from anybody.
That's
the thing.
There's no support as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
So that it has to be a whole company thing where they all agree. Yes, this is what we want to do, and we're actively pushing this to do it.
Yeah. So on the other side of culture, do you think that a recruiter's cultural background or ignorance of other cultures also contribute to lack of diversity in the workplace? For example, I know that, well, I don't know per se to state it as a fact, but for example, you can just look at someone's name and kind of tell that that person's black.
Yeah.
So do you think that impacts the
Yeah, of
actual
course.
recruitment and
Of
selection
course,
process?
of course. I mean, I've had many stories where we've had people who have had to anglicize their names because they were applying, couldn't get through. As soon as they turned their name into something that was more English, inverted commas, they found they got through. I've had stories where recruiters have told companies that they can't send this particular candidate over because their hair is messy, because they will have afro or
wow.
locks. We could go on for days with those type of stories. So yes, it does. It does. It's a factor. Yeah, depending on the recruiter. So what can you do? That is something that needs to be
So
tackled as
is
well.
there any way to address that issue within the workplace? Is there a way for us to, because sometimes I think black people can be objectified. So something like your hair, that's something that grows out of your skull. So isn't there a point where we just have to accept that this is what a black person looks like, but it doesn't affect their ability to do their job?
I think that again comes down to why we need to champion people.
Yeah.
Because when end of the day, people like money. Organizations are about money. They're about the bottom dollar. So when you can't argue the quality of someone's work, how they look is irrelevant.
Yeah,
And it will become irrelevant.
yeah.
And you see that with these so-called tech people who are, I'm in t-shirts, I only wear the same thing every day. How they look has become irrelevant because the quality of their work is second to none. You
That's
can't
right.
question it.
Yeah, and I think for most organisations, they invest so much money in terms of internal diversity initiatives, but they don't do that to their suppliers and vendors.
Yes.
So,
yeah,
like,
true.
you should, when you're recruiting, when you've got your open recs and you're briefing out recruiters, ask them what their policy on diversity and inclusion is. What do they do around it? Do they do unconscious bias training? Are they aware of it? Are they aware of the biases in their team? What's their team makeup? Again, that will change how they're sourcing candidates, where they're sourcing candidates.
right.
And if you think that actually diversity and you truly believe that it's going to help your team perform, then go to suppliers that share your values in it.
Yes. Yeah. It's not
Like, the market will move with its feet.
Exactly.
The recruiters will find a way to adapt to that, and they will adapt to it.
Yeah, because it means them staying alive.
Yeah.
So they'll have to adapt. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's a great point. Actually, yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So having that diverse team kind of translates into our next question, because a lot of brands have been boycotted by their customers over the past year because they've failed to communicate a particular narrative in the correct way to their customers. Is that down to the fact that there's a lack of diversity, or could it be intentional as well, a bit?
I love a loaded question. I can see it from 2 points of view, because I've had people I know who have been on, say, photo shoots and worked on campaigns who have told me what would have happened is the same as what happened to XYZ brand if they hadn't been there. So essentially, they've been able to shut down some of the mistakes that.
Really?
Yes, because they've
Okay.
actually been on the team and said,
man.
you know what, no, don't do that. I can't give an example here, but yeah, it's basically what happened with, say, that very well-known clothing company could have happened to another company. It was a chocolate company, but the person who was on set was from a BAME background, was able to say, no, don't do that with that.
Yes.
Don't do that. Do this, otherwise you're going to get this backlash. And of course, no one ever heard of that story because it didn't happen. At the same time, I think, especially Black Twitter, we can be quite reactionary.
Yes.
And it's something that can be utilized or manipulated. You know, I mean, there was one nail varnish company that came out and they called it Negro. I think they called it Negro.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Really?
Yeah, it was back in February.
Massively deliberate.
Yeah, so, it was so deliberate.
So deliberate,
So
yeah.
deliberate that people were like, really.
It was like 2 weeks after the other.
That's right. Yeah.
the other
So they've just capitalised.
Yeah, they were just trying to. It was clear they were trying to capitalize on
Because
it.
any
you know?
publicity
and then
is good publicity.
people buy it.
Yeah. Or people go and they investigate the brand.
Yes.
Yeah, which is exactly what they want.
It's like
Yeah.
raising awareness.
Just in a really,
Just in a
really odd way. So, yeah, I will agree with you, Ryan. I think some of it, I can't categorically say that it's intentional.
Of course,
I can't
of
because
course,
I'm not in the companies. But it can. There's a point that you can say, okay, do you know what? Are you just trying to add fuel to the fire, or did you genuinely make a mistake? Yeah.
But then I also think, like, when you spoke about agencies before, we said how bureaucratic it could be. So you're going through so many levels of people. So
Yeah.
sometimes it makes me think. That's why the whole issue of it, is it intentional? Because you think, shouldn't this have gone through quite a few layers before the public sees it?
Well, it depends on who those decision makers are.
Yeah.
So, like, you might have a company with great diversity, but if the voices of those diverse people aren't being heard, or they're not being listened to, or they're not actually in positions of authority, it still has the same effect.
No difference.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, no difference.
Which is, I guess, the frustrating thing, which is why you need to make sure that actually, all right, you've got people in your organisation, or you're trying to, but actually, are you actually then providing a platform that everyone can contribute fully?
That's right.
In a way
yeah.
that presents it. So
Yeah. And even with the whole very well-known soft drinks company, even with that hoo-ha, when I started looking into it and how they could make such a mistake, it was as soon as I realised that the whole thing was done internally, I was like, oh well, that's why. Because you don't do a major global campaign with your internal team. You always outsource to an agency because they won't be in that bubble.
Yes.
They won't be in that bubble of, oh wow, we sip this, we smoke it, and everything else. So it just has to be like that. So there's a lot of factors. It's quite a loaded question because there's a lot of factors.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, if there were more diverse decision makers, to Cam's point, then I think a lot of this stuff wouldn't get through the net.
Yeah, which kind of moves us nicely into the next question. Do you think organisations miss out on business opportunities by having a homogenous workforce? If so, what type of
by
opportunities?
definition, isn't it? Yeah.
What type of opportunities do you think they miss out on?
I think the whole world does in general, and that's not just a BAME thing. I think that's across the world. If we look at the makeup of where people are and where people are buying things, for example, there's a lot of opportunities in what are perceived third world countries at the moment, because they're coming out of that so-called third world, and then they're coming into the world where they've got disposable income, for example. But we're not even looking at these cases because we're thinking, this isn't a money opportunity. This is a poor country. It's not. I mean, that's not really what's
100%.
happening. Yeah. So I think that's just almost unfortunately standard procedure. I think that's just a human thing.
because to that point, and the point about globalization, so like the biggest market opportunity by 2020 will be Africa.
Yeah.
But there are so many challenges. No brands are kind of focusing on it. Whenever you hear the term EMEA, it's never looking specifically in Africa. Only a few brands that have kind of really lent into there as well, and that's a massive missed opportunity, because to actually understand and to trade often in those nations, wherever they may be, even in Central European nations, you need to have people from those communities that understand the nuances, that often speak the language, and can actually do business in those places as well. It's just identifying what's going to resonate. And most successful brands always capture a cultural moment.
That's right, yeah.
But you have to have that insight to capture a cultural moment.
Exactly right.
Otherwise, you're always going to be that bit removed from it.
Yeah.
Insight is a good word.
Yeah.
I mean, the Nike one's an interesting one with Colin Kaepernick, obviously, and it's been interesting their response that they obviously must have thought it through. But it's been interesting their responses to things, for example, the burning of their clothing and stuff like that. It's been interesting the way they've said, okay, look, if you're going to burn our clothes, cool. These are the safe ways to do it. And they've done little silly responses like that, and I'm pretty sure they've really ramped up their social teams because of they knew the batch should get. Because again, they've had really clever, quick remarks, and there's just really good copywriters, obviously, just writing behind responding to these.
They're ready.
Things.
They're ready.
They're prepared. They knew it would set the world alight in that sense. How much did you? Was it you that was saying how much everyone talking about it on Twitter? How much that is worth in money?
The media worth is insane.
Yeah, the media worth is
media
like
worth. That's what it was.
It's like millions.
It was millions.
It's loads. Yeah.
Re-advertisement.
Yeah, and that's what you were saying before, Ryan, about is it intentional? I don't think it's intentional with Nike. I just think that they, again, because of how, especially like I said, Black Twitter can sometimes react, they were like prepared for it.
Yes.
So it's like people are going to kick off, but this is what we're going to do. This is what.
Get the firefighters ready.
Yeah, I think you have to be a company that it makes sense with.
Yeah.
I think, and Nike obviously have a history of, regardless of whatever their true intention may be, Nike have a history of championing people from a diverse background.
That's
They have a history of pushing athletes who may be seen as controversial for XYZ.
Yeah.
Like Jordans.
There you go, Jordan. Exactly. The first Jordan when he was banned, they pushed. They still let him wear it. And
Yeah.
who's the lady who's transgender, who's a runner, and they've done a really great advert of her.
Semenya?
Recently. Yeah, and a great advert of her recently saying, why are you scared of me? And they break it down really well. And it's these little nuances where you can say Nike understand the person more so than, and then understand the culture for that person more so than other brands would.
Sure.
So
Yeah. So one last question on that section is: do you think that placing employees into categories is also a part of the problem? Like having ethnic minorities and Caucasians and all of that contributes to the issue as well?
Yeah, it does. I think also as well it's how they're identified. Like I don't know how much certain organisations have gone into allowing people to self-identify. For one, I think the challenge is with categorisation, but also the terminology as well. So you've got BAME or BAME in and of itself is actually quite confusing. So remember when we were working back at my previous company, we had internal employee resource groups that were global, and ethnicity in the US is completely different.
Yeah.
There is no way you'd have a BAME group. Everyone was completely separate and completely identified as Latino, completely identified as Asian, completely identified as black. So it's kind of that created challenges with some of the terminology, but then how in the UK our makeup is and how we culturally identify is different. But we basically said, like, okay, is there a better point that we can rally behind than BAME? Is it a stopgap? Is the language going to iterate? And I'm sure it will.
Yeah, it will.
But I think for now, in terms of where diversity is on that journey, I think actually it's the next best thing that we have to start building those building blocks. As we become more diverse and more inclusive, we can then move on and maybe use more appropriate terms or more relevant terms or things that don't have those barriers of categorisation as well.
I think we're very scared in the UK. I think we're scared of words. So you go somewhere and you say the word black and everyone gets nervous. You can't say white. You can't say a person was white. It's like people just doing descriptives. Like they get scared of the descriptions, and I think that is what causes a lot of the issues in the first place. So even the reason why we've got BAME, it's because people are scared to say black, Asian, white. That if that's what they are, that's what they are. Does that make sense? And it's just about breaking, and I think that comes down from the ignorance again of but not actually seeing people in different environments and getting to know people and speaking to them and saying, okay, yeah, we are actually exactly the same. We just skin tone is literally the only difference, and that's when we start to get that breakdown more, and people are more comfortable with saying, oh, and this person's a black person, or this person's a white person, or this person's an Asian person, or what have you. That's when I think everybody will it'll be smoother again.
Yeah, so they're not afraid of that particular label.
The labels.
Well, it's not even that's a label.
It's just a fact.
It's a fact. It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Because so many people ask you, it's like, are you offended by being called black? And it's like, why? why would I? So many times, I'm like, why would I be?
Offended?
Do you get offended by
Have I never seen my own reflection? Do you know what I mean? It's like
No, but I just think that if you go back to Black Twitter, I think the whole world's just easily offended these days.
Yeah.
But I think kind of in terms of gender's like a really interesting one because it's showing that iteration. Like it is like if it probably now more than ever, it's like going up like a hockey stick in the sense of like, okay, typically there was only thought to be two. Now people occupy different genders and they describe themselves in different ways. And I think it will get to a point of acceptance, but at the moment, because there isn't quite uniform acceptance, people are like, oh, I have to kind of identify myself as that, or otherwise people won't even understand me.
No, exactly.
So it's there two sides of the coin with labels.
And also, but going back to my original point, Cam is black. You know, because I can see he's black. He can't hide his colour. I think even with sexuality, you can. It's not visible. It's not visible in that sense unless you want it to be. You know, but his skin colour is something you can't hide. So it's just like, sorry, you know, you understand what I mean? So I don't think it's a label; it's a fact. You know, right. So I think society has to be a little bit careful about that. Yeah, otherwise it's just going to cause a lot of confusion. Yeah,
even more so.
Yeah, even more so. And then you end up majoring on the minors. You know, yeah.
So we're going to move into We Are Stripes work. Is there an age limit for creative individuals who can access your services?
No.
That's good news.
Yeah.
That's really good. Because what we found is like, even with regards to accessing funding and everything seems to be 18 to 25-year-old. Just like, so older people don't have ideas anymore. But then on the flip side, I thought that there has to be a cap though, because at one point you were 18 and 25 too, and there must have been some opportunities there
Sure.
for you. So then as you get older, you just keep accessing the services. So I guess it makes sense, but I just find that every organization that you approach these days just leaves out the people who are a bit older.
You know, I think that, again, I think
Interesting.
that's a world thing, and I think again the world is changing, and I think as the world changes, people get used to the fact that people start their careers later, people start to get to know and do things at different times. Whereas obviously we're working with a generation who said, okay, this age is what you're meant to do,
Right.
this,
That's right,
this age
that's
you're meant
right.
to be here. So I think that will change. Hopefully, as like more of us people.
But I also think sometimes it's social stigmas, in the sense that by the time you're 35, you're supposed to have been established. And then now at 35, you can actually start a whole new career.
Absolutely.
There's even something that D. Allen, one of our guests, said. He said when he goes out and he does talks, he finds that a lot of people come to him for advice who have sometimes been in the industry longer than him.
That's right. Yeah.
Because everyone still wants someone to be able to go back and forth with to thrash out an issue, rather than just thinking, oh, I'm so old now, I can't talk to anyone.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, particularly on the 18 to 25 thing. And you mentioned funding as well. So, like, a lot of companies are starting to explore apprenticeships as ways of getting kind of funding or getting people into their business. Actually, a lot of people don't realise that apprenticeships can be of any age.
Yeah,
you
that's
can take them
right.
at any
Yeah.
age. You can already be an existing
realise
employee, yeah.
I didn't realise
So you
that.
could literally retrain someone. I think there was one person the other day who worked for Auntie Nolan. They had 3 apprentices. One of them had been in the company for 30 years.
Wow.
And they were
wow.
retraining as an apprentice to do data. They were data manager, and now they're going to be a data scientist. So it's kind of, there is a focus on it, but there are resources and tools to work and kind of fund outside those barriers that people don't realise. And I didn't realise that
Yeah, I
until
didn't know that,
not too long ago.
Yeah.
So.
But again, yeah, I think it is societal. It is down to the fact that we live in an old regime, I suppose, where people say you have to be married by this time, you need to be this at this age, you need to have kids by this, you need to have your career by it, and I think that's changing.
It's
think,
changing,
yeah,
yeah,
the world is changing,
The
and
world is changing.
as the older guard who enforced that start to move out, I think that will hopefully,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And because career paths are not really linear anymore,
No,
you know,
exactly.
it's kind of like snakes up, as it were, as opposed to you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and you do this, and then ta-da, you've arrived. You know, it's not like that anymore. Yeah. Ta-da.
So your goal is to change from the top and build using your 3 main pillars, which are visibility, mentoring, and community. Can you explain the fundamentals of each pillar for our audience and how they contribute to your overall success as an organisation?
So in terms of visibility, as we mentioned before, is in terms of championing people who are coming into the industry, who are already in the industry, doing really well, senior talent as well, so they can be seen by people. And we do that with with our content. We do that with our social media. We do that with putting people on judging panels, expert panels, and then speaker panels as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, that kind of feeds into the community as well, I suppose. For us, it's about being able to show people that we can work together and we can work with different D&I initiatives, different, like from disability, for example, to other box, to the plethora of the other communities out there. And I do think that if there isn't, nothing really builds off of one,
Yeah.
you know. So if there isn't a community of organisations all pushing towards the same thing, then you'll never get any change in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah,
So
collaboration over
exactly,
there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm very big on promoting and pushing everybody, because I just believe that for there to be an actual scene, there has to be successes everywhere. So I'm very much about, okay, let's push this, let's push. If disability are doing this, let's say something about it. If other box are doing this, let's say something about it. If that's what I do believe in that.
And community?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess for the mentoring side, it's looking at we mentioned having role models previously as well, so making those role models accessible, drawing down from their learnings, and also providing people avenues to help develop themselves or to overcome certain challenges and barriers that they may be facing, or just to have a regular cadence in terms of tracking their own career progression as well. So we do that in a number of ways. So we have a a mentoring scheme that we run directly. So we get a number of inbound requests for mentors and mentees. So we do both elements of that via our social channels or via the website. We provide some light training resource if people are going to be paired via that way. But again, to the point of collaboration, we partner with a lot of existing mentoring groups already, because they are either in the need for people that want to benefit from having a mentor, or there's people that are members of our own community that want to give their time and help support each other as well. So some of which are typically, you've got the Media Trust, a big one, Brixton Finishing School, Uprising, Creative Mentoring Network. So we've probably got half a dozen or so that will help contribute towards, and they all provide training. So a lot of people's first experiences, I've never been a mentor, or am I senior enough to be a mentor? And everyone is.
Yeah.
So everyone has valued advice that they can give, and the majority of it is just listening and then enabling whoever it is that you're doing the mentoring with to then help them deliver their own goals, versus you being a more senior person and telling someone this is what you need to do to get to where you need to be.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you signpost to other external organisations?
Yeah, if we have someone come in and ask us, is there a company that we can that you know of or that we can work off who looks at a certain type of issue that they want to solve? Yeah, we're more than happy to say yes. We know this person, and I think that's the good thing about Stripes and the fact that it is quite collaborative, because like I mentioned before, we don't try and solve every problem.
Yeah.
If we did, it would take too long. It'll take too long because there's a plethora of issues. But we have no problem, just like you said, it's collaboration of competition, of saying, okay, here's a company that works with like mental health or what have you, and then we can send people over there. Yeah, it increases the network, increases the reach, and obviously it increases our value as well, because that's what we can do. The things we can do.
Okay, so throughout the conversation we've identified that there is an issue within the actual organisations themselves. Do you do any work to sort of tackle or focus on cultural and behavioural change within organisations?
We have done in the past. I think it's to the effect of some of the things, particularly around the mentoring, help support that retention piece a little bit as well. And we do have done some consultancy in the past of, okay, so how can you create an environment that's more inclusive, some pillars around that. It is the organisations which we've done it with previously, like Oath, for example, was one of the main ones. You have to work really, really closely to what their strategic visions are. It's not, I think for us, it's more of, or not so much of, okay, can we create a blueprint that will help you fix your inclusion challenges? We tend to partner with organisations on a lot of different activities. We get an understanding of who's in their company, what their makeups are, what their priorities are, and then can feed in some initiatives in terms of their actual overall recruitment strategy or hiring strategy or culture in terms of communication or what the actual work environment is like as well.
Again, remember we said before, if a company's not fully bought in, we can go in and we can give you a workshop and say, this, you need to do this, you need to do that. But then as soon as we leave, it's like, well, you'll be empowered for a day, a week, a month. But that's not the whole company culture. Then it's like, okay, we're back to normal.
Yeah.
So.
If you were to expand your remit, what industry would you like to tackle and why?
Artificial intelligence. Because that's going to be the thing that's going to have the biggest seismic change out of any of the industries that we're working in. But it's the one that probably suffers from lack of diversity the most. And if you have people that have their own biases reflecting it onto code or decision making, and there's been so many examples of things not being kind of either AR not reading certain people's ethnicities based on their faces or voices, etc. as well. So that would probably be one that you could have a impact that which would expand across all different industries as well. So
yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, geez, it could get a lot better. I could get a lot better.
Yeah, can you imagine them all
I heard like an interesting one. I think they've actually, this blew my mind as well. They've trialled it in the north of England about people being released from prison, and the decision being made whether people will be released is now made by AI and it's not made by a judge.
Really?
So they input all of the variables of what's happened before and when people have reoffended and why, and then they get the prisoner to fill out questionnaires, they get other people to input it, and they produce an output of this is the likelihood to reoffend, and that's determining.
And again, because when you think about that,
yeah.
comes down to the bias of the creator.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Who creates the data? That's the main thing. Jeez.
Wild, right? Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
So, have you had any success stories since the beginning of We Are Stripes that's exceeded your expectations?
I think our events, if I'm honest, perform really well. Not to brag or anything like that. But they perform really well, and the feedback we always get is phenomenal. It's really, really good.
What type of events have you held in the past or plan to?
Well, the first one that we did in collaboration with another DNI initiative called Access VFX, which is for more diversity and inclusion in the kind of like visual effects for film sector.
Okay.
And working with them has been great because they understand that they have an issue with it, but they realise that it's because it's from an education point of view, as in people don't realise the roles that are available in that particular sector. So we did a event with them back in March, and how long did it look? 4 days for us to sell out of like 150 spaces.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then on the day I spoke to a few people who had come, and I asked them why they come, and they're like, because I wanted to see, you'd build it as, okay, you can do special effects for films like Black Panther or Avengers Infinity Wars and everything else. And not only that, we were able with this particular initiative to get people who are from the community who have worked on these films. So it was like, okay,
insane.
Amazing. You'd be talking to the Ghanaian guy who was saying that, when I was working with Robert Downey Jr.'s kind of like Avatar and whatnot in this film, I had to do this and this, and they were amazed. We had a really lovely text message come back from the mum of one of the boys who was brought, and she's just like, he inspired him so much. And
It was like 11 or something.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So there's no age limit on who can attend.
But it was
as well.
interesting because she emailed us and she was my son's like quite young, is it okay if he comes? Yeah, of course. And then the message, he's really, when he first came, he was really shy and timid, and then by the end of the workshop, he was talking with all the designers, and he was like, he's really excited about it. And mum was like, thank you so much for letting him see this and be a part of it. And
See it, be it.
Absolutely.
And it sounds corny, but you never know what that's done for his life. And it sounds small, it doesn't know what direction it might take.
Exactly.
No, exactly. And then the Make in London one that we had as well was great, because we had the attendee said that, okay, first of all, you didn't seem to struggle with getting diverse panels. We had people with disabilities and whatnot, so that you guys didn't struggle. It was like, no, but they were just like the content that was really rich, and it was. So they said it was really rich and it was interesting, and it wasn't one of those conferences that you go to, you sit and you just hear a lot of people just drone on about nothing. I think our events perform really, really well, and it's just again, going back to that whole trying to solve some of these issues in a bit of more of an innovative way. We're from the creative industries. We should be able to be more creative when it comes to problem solving.
Yes.
So instead of just doing the same thing that everyone else seems to be doing and just having conversations, we kind of craft our events to educate, to inform, and to connect people as well. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Do you have any exciting events coming up that our audience would
so
be interested in?
We're having the second one on 25th.
Yes.
2 weeks.
So
but sold out now. By the time this comes out,
and this one is 90-minute workshops as well, for animation, for visual effects, for character design, and then 3D modeling for games and film. So there's so many people who can get into those roles if they're like illustrators or if they're content creators and whatnot. So they'll get like 90 minutes hands-on kind of like work with some of the directors and some of the head of like games and films and whatnot. But it's sold out.
Where can people find out about any upcoming events for you guys?
Social media, hit our social media channels. All of them are We Are Stripes. Website, sign up to our newsletter.
Newsletter.
Brilliant. So thank you so much for coming down today, guys. It's been absolutely amazing interview, and I hope that our audience benefits from it as much as we did.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
I
really,
also
really
hope it promotes the message and the work that you guys are trying to do, because it's so important.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy it. Thank you.
No worries. I feel like I should applaud. I don't know why. I'm sorry.
Again, thanks guys for tuning in to another episode of For The Creators. You can find us on Instagram, that's at For The Creators Podcast, on Twitter at @for_the creators, and you can get in touch on forthecreatorsshow@gmail.com.
Yes, guys, thank you very much for your ears and tune in to the next episode. Also, remember to subscribe,
Review.
review, and recommend.
Yeah, share.